I'm going to clutter up your calendar, but I'm going to lighten up your mind. And
Mm.
to me, that is the much higher priority here.
You're listening to Overwhelmed Working Woman, the podcast that helps you be more calm and more productive by doing less. I'm your host, Michelle Gauthier, a former overwhelmed working woman and current life coach. On this show, we unpack the stress and pressure that today's working woman experiences. And in each episode, you'll get a strategy to bring more calm, ease, and relaxation to your life.
Hi, friend. If you've ever felt like you're drowning in your to-do list, raising my hand right now, or falling constantly behind, or just feeling guilty that you still can't seem to do it all, this episode is going to be great for you. My guest today is Kelly Nolan. I'm so excited to have her on. I basically stalked her down to try to get her to come and talk to you guys because I love what she's doing. She is a former patent attorney, and now she is a time management expert, and she's the founder of something called the Bright Method, which is a practical, really structured system designed specifically for us professional women who are juggling a million things and feeling stretched too thin. So when you listen to Kelly's interview today, you're going to hear why your current time management system might be failing you and how to create one that actually works for your real life, and how to uncover and manage the invisible to-do list that's draining your energy. It was really interesting in our conversation, thinking about all the things that we do that aren't anywhere on our to-do list or on our calendar. And then she's going to teach us too the key to using your calendar as a powerful tool for clarity and confidence and boundary setting. I'm really excited to have you on today. I absolutely love what you're doing and I can't wait to hear about it. But tell us first how you got into being a time management expert from after going to law school and being a patent lawyer.
Sure thing. So I basically had been organized most of my life I had my paper planners, did okay. I would say organized on the time front, on that front. And my physical organization skills are not up to snuff. But I had been organized and my systems of paper planners had gotten me far and things were going well. And then I became an actual attorney and I got really overwhelmed pretty quickly. I looked like I had it together on the outside. I was hitting deadlines, all of that. But inside, I was way too anxious, way too stretched thin. When I had time, outside of being an actual lawyer, I just couldn't focus on my friends. I was constantly thinking about work and worrying about things and just was like, this cannot be what it's supposed to be.
This cannot be what I've been working toward for my entire life.
Yeah, I do not like this. And I looked for time management help. This was probably like 2012, 13, somewhere in there. And there just wasn't much help out there, or candidly looking back, a lot of it was from men who probably had a lot more support at home than I did as, a single person as an attorney. And I struggled for help, couldn't make anything stick, and then slowly over time started cobbling together what I thought of as my own weird little system for managing my time. And I kept practicing. I thought that the system I'd come up with was just helping me get to where everybody else already was. That's how it felt at the time. And it wasn't until years later that I realized, oh, other people feel like I felt. And so I started teaching time management. And that's what I do now. I teach what now I call the Bright Method. My own weird little system is now rebranded into something that sounds cool.
Yes, it does
Here
sound
I
cool.
am.
I love the name. I love the name.
Yeah.
That is so cool. Okay, so when you said you teach the Bright Method, how do you teach it? Like, if somebody wants to learn about it, is it a
Yep.
class? Do they work with you one-on-one?
Yep. So historically, I've run it in 2 8-week programs each year, usually at the start of the calendar year and the start of the school year. In this fall, in 2025, I'm going to be starting to run it more open so that people can join when it's best for them, because it is a time-consuming process to learn, which is a little ironic when you're feeling strapped on time. And so I want people to be able to jump in when it works for them. And so I should be still hammering out all the details, but opening it kind of like at the first of each month between September and probably April. And what it is I walk people through step by step through learning the system. We kind of have like 4 chapters and dig into it. And then we have a couple weeks where we run the whole system out together. And happy to go into it more. I just don't want to go
Yes, I
off.
definitely want to hear all about it, because one of the big pillars that we talk about on this podcast is time management. There's lots of things that come in to cause overwhelm, but I feel like being able to efficiently and effectively manage your time is a huge portion of what
Absolutely.
causes overwhelm. So I definitely want to ask you about that. How did you know that it just wasn't you said you had this paper system that you would use, and then something happened and that just didn't work anymore. What
Yeah.
was that thing? Like, what? Because my clients will talk about how they've been able to handle things for a long time, and then all of a
Yes.
sudden they're completely overwhelmed. Was it a
Absolutely.
specific thing, or can you say what it was for you?
For me, well, taking a step back, I think my belief, and it's just my, based on the clients I work with, is that a lot of us have systems that get us very far. And then there's some tipping point in life that happens that life becomes more complicated and the systems that got us far just can't keep up. For me, I was an early bloomer. It was my first real job. For
Mhm.
other people, it's becoming a manager, becoming an executive. It might be switching to a different company. It might be having a first kid, maybe having a second kid. It can be
Mhm.
a lot of different things, maybe helping a parent. There are a lot of tipping points where, again, life gets more complicated. And suddenly, this system that you've always used to give you clarity no longer is making you feel the way you want to feel inside and giving you that clarity. And at least for past me, I was like, well, I've always used this system. It's always worked. So it must be me, when in reality, I think it's just a system failure that it just can't keep.
Yes, yes. Okay, yeah, that's very in line with what I hear about overwhelm in general, where I've been fine. I've been an overachiever all my life. I've managed all these things. I will say often the second baby is the put it over the edge where
Yeah.
you can't manage all the things at the same time. So that makes sense that you see that one too. Okay, so tell me about the Bright Method. I love the name, first of all. And since you were a patent lawyer, I love that it has the little TM after it too. It's official. Of course, you're going to cover down on that. So tell me what it is as a time management system and like how it's different from your basic time management system.
Yeah, well, I think it's just really geared towards helping professional working women. And I think that what I've realized is in the past, a lot of the systems I had tried before, again, were often by men, and it's no knock on men, but typically, very broadly, generally speaking, men usually have more support from, their spouse at home than women do. And
Mhm.
double whammy, women are often providing that support. So there's even more on their plate. And so really what I think it comes down to that's a differentiator is that it helps with the mental load that goes with all the roles, and we can get into that. And it also helps people draw boundaries in a more clear way, but in a way that works for women. Like we have to be comfortable to draw boundaries, comfortable enough and like know how to phrase it because we know it comes off differently when women draw boundaries than men and things like that.
Mhm.
And so I like working on that with women as well. And I find that we'll talk about it more, but like what the Bright Method gives you helps you feel more confident standing in your no or drawing a boundary, whatever it might be, because you feel like you have a better sense that your boundary is objectively reasonable given everything on your plate.
Okay, that
So,
makes sense. Like you can look at it and see,
yeah,
I'm not just saying I don't have enough time. I have everything strategically planned and I do not have enough time.
yes, and I have
Yeah.
the data and the specifics to talk
Yeah.
about it and back it up, which, when I was practicing for a couple of years, I was like, I know I'm overwhelmed, but I just don't feel like I know enough to know if this is reasonable or I can back it up or even just be able to articulate it well. And when I started using the system and the way we'll talk about, it just is everything's visual. You can see it. I can look at my calendar and see what's on my plate and see what has to move and push back and be like, no, I have this other deadline at this time. And it gives you a lot of clarity that I was lacking before. And so
Yes, absolutely. And I think, at least in my experience with working in corporate, a lot of companies' cultures are built around the idea. I'm assuming law is definitely in the same thing where working a ton, working many hours, that whole, well, this has to be done tomorrow. I don't know how you're going to get it done, but it has to be
yeah.
done tomorrow. And so the thought of having like a fully laid out, here's everything I'm working on, here's how long it's going to take you. I mean, I just feel calm inside thinking about that. I
Yeah.
love
Yeah.
that. Yeah. So how
Yeah.
do we get there? I know it's much
Yeah.
deeper than we can cover on like a 30-minute podcast, but just high level, what is the
Yeah.
Bright Method?
So basically what it is even though I was a paper planner lover, again, I just don't think it could keep up with life. And so I do go all in on a digital calendar. Just to be really clear, I still process paper and pen. I have a legal pad right next to me still. But when it comes to actually managing time and understanding where time is going, I do think a digital calendar just can't be beat. So I will focus on that. It's either Outlook, Google, Apple, some combination of those. And so
Mm-hmm.
we leverage those systems with a lot of smart strategies. So in chapter 1, what we do is we dig into the invisible personal to-do list. So
Mm-hmm.
kind of everything we're managing at home, if you really think about, like, especially your mornings and your evenings, all the things that we do, like showering and getting ready, walking your dog, making meals. If you have little kids, bed and bath times with kids. If you have older kids, homework. Like if you don't have kids, all the other things that we do with our time.
Mm-hmm.
All of those things take up a ton of mental space, but they also take up hours of our day. And
Oh my
so,
gosh. I have to pause for a second because I've literally never thought about my taking a shower and getting ready as like a to-do list item, an invisible to-do list item.
yep,
But you do have to build that, 45 minutes or whatever, especially if I have to dry my hair.
yeah,
Takes a while.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about this is it's exactly what you're saying is we don't tend to put it on our calendar. We don't tend to put it on a to-do list. And yet that and all those other things I mentioned, we're playing that jigsaw puzzle in our head. Okay, if I need to leave by this time, I need to shower here, I need to do this
Mhm.
then, and backing it all out. And then we hold it and try and memorize it. And so all we're trying to do here is do all of that, but then put it in a calendar.
Mhm.
And what I love about a digital calendar is you can repeat things, every workday or every Monday, Wednesday, it looks like this. You can repeat them and then you move them around. Like, I'm not like, and then you live it, your life rigidly. Like, that's not the
Mhm.
point. It's just get all the things that you already are juggling out of your head and into a system so you can see them visually and understand, does this even work? And sometimes you see, oh, I've been trying to do an hour and a half of things in an hour, and that's why my mornings are tough. And I
Mhm.
can readjust then. And also, it shows you what's left over, like what your actual capacity is to do other things. And that's really important because often we're like, I have 12 hours to figure out what to do today. And in reality, 4 or 5 of those hours are taken up by all the things that we just talked
Mhm.
about. And
Mhm.
so it's a good reality check on what is your actual capacity. So that's where we start. Chapter 2 is doing a little bit of that on the work front. So really thinking about when is your energy great? How do you want to match make that? What are your high energy things? How do you plan, how much email do you deal with every day? How are we going to protect at least some time for that? It doesn't have to be, email's a good nook and cranny activity, but it also, if you have 5 hours of email every day, you should probably block at least 3 hours on
Mhm.
your calendar
Mhm.
for it. Things like that. Chapter 3 is really when we get into more of the one-off to-do list stuff. That's where a lot of people like to start with time blocking. And I think that's often a big mistake and an understandable one that people make is they hear about time blocking and putting things in your calendar and you're like, cool, I'm going to start doing that. But again, if you are looking at 12 hours of free time, you time block that beautifully, forget all the invisible stuff, then you don't have a realistic game
Mhm.
plan.
And then you
So
think the plan doesn't work
yes,
when really it's just you're not considering everything. Okay, that makes
yes.
a lot of sense.
Yeah, you either blame yourself or you blame time blocking without realizing, it's a totally understandable mistake to make, but that can help a lot is starting where we start. And then the last component is there are a couple planning sessions I recommend like annually and things like that, but the big one is a weekly planning session that I love to hold on Fridays, maybe Thursdays if Fridays are tough for you if your energy is too low.
Mm-hmm. And what do you do on Friday?
So I am a big proponent of really being clear about what you're trying to accomplish. And when we talk about what I think a successful planning session looks like, it can be about 2 hours. I like to be really realistic about planning and time management in general. And so in that planning session, high level overview is step 1 is gather all the action items that have come at you, flown at you over the week from all the different places. And that can look different for people. That can look differently, if you're in Slack or Teams or email or your head, or just even looking at your project overview. I teach a bird's eye view of like, what are all the things on your plate? Think about all of those.
Mhm.
But it also can be your natural tendencies. Like if I'm on the go, I use Apple reminders just to capture to-dos. And so one of my line items during that week is to go look at my reminders and pull out all of the to-dos
Mhm.
and then bridge them to the calendar. And so step 1 is basically that. Gather all the things, look at all the big projects, make sure you kind of have captured everything you need to do. and roughly throw it in the calendar when you think it's going to happen, when you think you
Mhm.
need to do it. It can be next week, be 3 weeks from now, it could be 3 months
Mhm.
from now. And then step 2 is kind of smoothing out the next 2 weeks. I like planning 2 weeks at a time. I just think it's really helpful to have a little bit of a broader view than just a week. And that can be smoothing things out, pushing things out, prioritizing within the calendar, that kind of stuff. It can also be looking at childcare, planning, just making sure you have extra childcare where you need it, extra pet care, things like that.
Okay, that makes sense. I like the concept. I've never thought about doing 2 weeks out until I started listening to your podcast, and I think it's a really interesting concept because then you kind of have already done a once over on the week you're
Yes.
on, and then you're doing the long view on the second week, so that just once you get into that rhythm, I bet that feels really good, where you can kind of fine tune the week that's coming up and you're not starting from scratch.
Yeah. And I think that there are some things that we see, and I should say even farther than 2 weeks out, that you're like, "Oh, man, I gotta start working on that
Mhm.
now." You don't wanna just see something, and I will say that's a line item, and kinda that step 1 is you don't necessarily have to back out and plan out how you're gonna accomplish all your projects in, like, let's say, the next 3 months during a planning session, but pretend you're a lawyer. When I was a litigator, there's some deadlines that you just wanna scan the next 3 months and make sure that type of deadline's not on there. Because if you have, like,
Mhm.
a motion for summary judgment, you need to know that 3 months in advance,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
maybe more. And so that's the type of stuff that you don't have to, like, every deadline you see in the next 3 months, figure out how you're gonna accomplish it, but you wanna see those big ones, and you wanna be kinda consistently looking at the horizon for those too.
Okay, that makes sense. And what are some of the things that the women who are in your group and learning your methods, what are some of the things that they object to or struggle with in terms of getting all of their time on paper? Like, do they say, I can't do this, or it takes too much time to plan it, or it's too structured? Like, what are some of the objections that someone might have if they're going from paper planning or very loose planning to this
Yeah.
method that's much more strategic and specific?
Yep. I would say the biggest initial one is, "This looks really overwhelming in my calendar."
Mhm, mhm,
There is a lot in there, and I do teach tech strategies to help it not be quite so overwhelming, but
mhm,
it is. I mean, we are putting a lot more in your calendar than you probably have traditionally done,
mhm,
and I think that people are suddenly like, I don't like it." And what I encourage people to do is think, this is just reflecting what you're already doing with your time. You're just
mhm,
now having to see it and confront it, but it's already what you were doing with your time. Again, before you might have just held all of the things you're seeing in your head, where now we're just getting it out of your head and into a calendar that we can play with,
mhm.
and we can be flexible with it. We don't have to live with this rigidly, but now we get to play with it outside of our brains. And what I really think about it is the other thing I would say too is, often the calendar looks and feels overwhelming to read through because it's a great red flag that you are trying to do too much. Like,
Mhm,
to me, there's such a simple elegance of a digital calendar that there's only so much space. There are only so many blocks of things that are going to fit in there. And if it is overwhelming and you're tightening things up to try and fit it in and all that kind of stuff, that's just a red flag for you that you're trying to do an objectively unrealistic amount of things. And that can be hard. I'm not saying that, I mean, there's a lot of frustration in that, but I really encourage people to run towards that front end frustration because it will save you day to day living from stress if you are
Yes,
planning more
yes.
realistically.
Yes, I feel like your point I just wanna repeat because it was so good, is that your digital calendar might look more cluttered than you're used to seeing, but your brain feels so much more clear. And you and I both know from working with women who feel overwhelmed that when your brain is clear, you can make actual progress on
Yep.
things. When your brain is cluttered, you can't even decide what to start on because you're
Yeah.
just in that space of overwhelm. This is just reminding me of when I first got divorced and I was trying to figure out having my own business, being a single mom, and the finances of that. I had to go and start checking all my bank transactions every day, and it's one of those things you wanna look at for the listener. I'm covering my eye
Absolutely.
and kind of looking away like, I don't even wanna see how many times I went to Starbucks last week, and I came from a previous life where that I wouldn't have even thought about that or worried about that. So it did kind of give me like a stress response to see them. But the more that I looked at them,
Yep.
and just like you said, it's a quick red flag. If you're spending more than you're actually bringing in, you're like,
Yep.
oh, okay, I'm overspent on this. And it's very similar to what you're talking about with the calendar. And now when I don't look at the transactions, I feel anxious. Like I want to see them all come in so I can be like, yep,
Yeah.
yep, I know that one. I chose to spend that one. So it feels completely different. So I like that. It's kind of like getting used to the idea of seeing all these things outside of your brain when we're used to
Absolutely.
carrying them around in our brain.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you are basically working all the time with women who feel stretched too thin when they realize they can't do it all or that they're have way more things on their to-do list than they can actually do. If they feel bad about that or guilty about that, how do you advise them? What should they do?
Yeah.
Got more than they can actually handle.
Well, they're kind of two big different approaches based on personal and professional, because obviously in some we have more control than the other,
Yeah.
sometimes. On the personal side of things, I do feel like a lot of us put a lot of pressure on ourselves on the personal front, whether it's goal setting or house projects or whatever it is. And there can be a real, you know, confrontation moment with yourself on the expectations that we're putting on ourselves. Let's say you've come to the realization that you can't do it all, but now you're like, but now what do I do? There are a couple of different approaches. One, I think, is having a place. I think of this as my bird's eye view that I was mentioning is kind of like the overview in my business or your professional life, and then the overview in your personal life, like the big buckets of things, not all the little tasks and at all, but like the big buckets, like, in the personal life, if you have a kid, like the two or three things that are causing you concern or that you just keep an eye on, that kind of stuff. Just like getting the stuff out of your head of the big buckets. In my business, it's also like, the main projects I'm working on at a time, maybe the products I'm selling. In your career, it might be like your own career goals, those like kind of big bucket type things. And then also all of your active projects and maybe some of your like back burner type projects.
Mhm.
And speaking of the back burner thing on your personal life and your business life, I think it's really helpful to have some sort of back burner column that you can park things that you're not going to do right now. Or an alternative is you just keep a list of somewhere that, let's say you have a lot of house projects you want to do, you have like a house project Apple Note. In that planning session, what you do is remind yourself to go look at those places and evaluate, do I want to do one of these things now?
Mhm. Mhm.
And I find that just having somewhere I can park those things that I'm kind of coming to terms that I can't do right now, having somewhere to park them and know I'll revisit them each week or each month really helps me let them go and take the pressure off of. I think sometimes we kind of like think about things or feel like we have to do them because we're afraid we're going to forget if we don't.
Mhm.
And as long as you
Absolutely.
can kind of park something that's good. I kind of went off on a tangent there. Going to like, let's say I have too much to do, that's one option, is to kind of look at all the things, brain dump them if you want to, and pull out anything that can wait, put them on one of those back burner columns or those lists, or calendar out 6 months from now. Consider doing this and just
Mhm.
then get it off your brain dump to-do list type thing and just start calling out what can I punt out? What can I really punt out? Then move for the more shorter term things and then the medium ground. That's really good on the personal front where we a little bit have some more control over what we do. In the professional life, that can be obviously harder. And what I really recommend doing, this is harder than it sounds, but I also think it's doable, is what is the top department, organization, whatever you want to think about, what is the top goal we're working towards right now? And which of these projects support that? And which ones don't and could be punted out. And if you have the autonomy to make some of those calls and say, actually, we're going to prioritize these three things, and part of prioritizing is making sure we have the time and energy as a team to do them, and that
Mhm.
requires eliminating other things, then you can make those tough calls. I find having the clarity of what's the one goal we're working on right now to really help with that. If you can't make those calls, though, that helps you go into a conversation with the data at your fingertips in
Mhm.
that way and say, hey, from where I'm sitting right now, this is the top goal. Given that, I think these are the projects we should prioritize. I do not think we can accomplish these other things and those three things. And I want to make sure we get those top three priorities projects done. even if you're wrong on what the top goal is, that conversation just exhibits such leadership to me and strategic thinking versus just going in and being like, I am overwhelmed,
Yeah, I
which is
can't do
also,
all of this.
yeah.
Yes.
But I feel about this approach is you're demonstrating leadership, which I think often we shy away from these conversations because we're afraid we'll come off as weak. Where this, I think you can come off as strong, even if you're wrong, again, on what the top priority is. And
Yes,
just,
exactly. If I'm thinking
yeah,
about a former employee coming to me and saying, "These are all the things I'm working on. I think these are the top 3 priorities. I can't get to these other 2." I'd be so delighted instead of
yeah,
just saying, "I don't know what to do. I'm overwhelmed." That really
yeah,
shows like initiative and leadership.
yeah. I think the final great part of that too is hopefully you're getting to then keep and move forward with projects you're also really enjoying. And I think that part of the beauty of coming up with solutions in these things is hopefully the solution you want that they then pick up on and run with. And I will say, just to be realistic, I've had clients where a lot of these conversations have gone really well. Often, I think bosses have no idea what's fully on your plate and had no idea that you were in, so many meetings and you want to eliminate some
Mhm.
meetings or have so many projects they don't know. And so, there are a lot of great bosses out there who I've been pleasantly delighted have had great responses, and then there's some that haven't. And I've had that in my own life. And to me, boundaries in the way that we're talking about essentially still work even when they don't
Mm.
because they show you the person's true colors. And that is really good data for you to know moving forward. Doesn't mean you have to leave the job right away, but I do think it helps inform how much of our life are we willing to sacrifice for this job that's not willing to show up for us in that way.
Yeah.
So it's
Yes.
still really good data too.
Yes. Interesting information. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. I love this whole method and concept. And I think that once you have the faith in your calendar and you believe that if something's on your calendar, it will get done, it feels great to put, like, I just kicked something out to June and I'm not going to give it any thought
Yes.
until I get there. And when I get to June, I'm going to be surprised. I'll be like, oh, yeah, that's great. I forgot about this.
Yeah.
I feel I can rest assured that I don't have to think about it because I know I have this system and that's how I work it. And when I get there, I'll evaluate. Yeah, is it June or
Yeah.
is it going to go to August or is this the month that I work on it? So even if you are listening and thinking, oh my gosh, that sounds so overwhelming, it feels like one of those things that might be surge overwhelming. Like it might be overwhelming at first, but once you
Yeah.
fit and you have this system, you can feel so much calmer.
Yeah. I completely
I
agree.
love
And
it.
I love your point on that you'll get to June and be like, "Oh, yeah," because like, that in and of itself is valuable. Because then your energy about it
Right.
is fresh, there's
Yep.
excitement, versus if you are staring this down on your to-do list for until June, and you're gonna be, like, already sick of it and tired of it by the time you
Exactly.
would
I
work on it.
hate
There's a
seeing
real
stuff on I
difference.
only like on my calendar what I'm going to actually do that week.
Yeah. I think that's
For
great.
sure. Yes. Okay, great. Well, I want to ask you the 2 questions that I ask every guest. The first one is, what is something that you do when you feel overwhelmed to make yourself feel better?
Well, candidly, my first reaction is to protect energy as best I can. And so,
Mhm.
as lame as it sounds, prioritizing sleep and unfortunately cutting out alcohol, I have found to be really like everything's better when you have energy. So when you're overwhelmed, more energy is not going to hurt. And
Yeah.
so that's really valuable. On the time management front, I would say is really identifying what's stressing me out, what's the real issue or issues stressing me out, and then thinking about how can I use my calendar to help me see how this can get done. So if there was a work meeting that is causing a lot of overwhelm and anxiety, it's really just sitting down with a paper and pen and being like, what are all the things I have to do to make this meeting a success? I
Mhm.
gotta draft the slides. I might have to edit the slides. I might need to get data from someone. I need to polish it. I'm gonna want to practice the presentation probably twice. I need to figure out what I'm gonna wear. I'm gonna need to go to the dry cleaners. I need to pick up from the
Mhm.
dry cleaners. I need to shower and get ready. I need to pack up my bag, like all the little things. And then calendar those out. And what's really strange to me is how much that reduces my anxiety around something because I think it helps our brains understand, okay, this can get done. I see how it can get done, and it does not all need to get done right now.
Mhm.
Just like approach this step by step, and that really helps me when I'm feeling overwhelmed.
Okay. Okay, that's great. So essentially, sleep, don't drink, and then plan it on your calendar. Okay, perfect. I love it. And then second, And this might be real obvious based on what we just talked about, but what's something you do to save yourself time or effort?
Well, I'll skip the obvious stuff of, what I love. And I will say that one thing I do is I do work from home. And one thing I shifted a while ago now, I can't even remember, is I do not clean the house when I'm at home. I will do things like laundry, like, getting the big things like
Mhm.
moving through the system, but the kitchen's a mess. My office is kind of a mess. I don't really deal with the cleaning until my kids are home. And then I try and clean everything. My office I might clean because I'm like in here and it bothers me at a certain point. But
Mhm.
I found that, you can spend a lot of time all day long cleaning up your house if
For
you let
sure.
yourself.
Yes.
And I think just realizing that's a great activity to do with my kids are around. I can talk to
Mhm.
them. They tend to follow me around and, I
Mhm.
can like talk to them then and we're moving around versus spending my very cherished limited childcare hours cleaning up. So,
Yes, yes. So you save yourself time by doing the thing you're supposed to be doing during the time that you've allotted to do it. I love it. That's great. That's great. Oh, this was so good, Kelly. Thank you so much. Before we wrap up, I will put your website in the show notes, but I want you to tell us about a free way that people can work with you.
well, thank you so much for having me, Michelle. This was really fun and it was a joy to have you on my podcast too. So definitely go check out Michelle's podcast also. I have a free 5-day program. I call it the Reset and Refresh. I'll share the link. And basically, it's for 5 days, you get free 5 video lessons with guides to walk you through some of the pillars of this. I have a lot of women who go through it, and that's all they need. And then off they are running. And if you want more, it's a great way to get a taste of what the Bright Method is beyond today's episode. I do believe that time management is incredibly personal. I don't think that everyone should be using my method. It's just if it's a right fit for you, I'd love to get to work with you. And it's a great way to check it out. So it's at kellynolan.com/refresh. But again, the link can be in the show notes.
Yeah, I'll definitely put those on the show notes so they're easy to find. And if you are loving this conversation and this idea, your podcast is also called The Bright Method.
Yes. Yes.
Right,
Thank
so
you.
they can listen to yes, so they can listen to your podcast as well. And it was funny when I reached this is a random little backstory, but when I reached out to Kelly and pitched for me to be on her podcast, and she said, "Oh my gosh, I listened to your podcast." So I
Yeah,
feel like we are of very similar minds. And if you like the things that I'm talking about, you'll like what Kelly's talking about, and vice versa,
absolutely.
because we're both trying to solve the same type of problem. So I
Absolutely.
really loved collaborating with you. It feels great. And now I feel like I have another new friend that I made from
Absolutely. And I
podcasting.
love that. I love that. Need more business friends.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Okay. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for listening to the Overwhelmed Working Woman podcast. If you want to learn more about my work, head over to my website at michellegothier.com. See you next week.